Welcome to the What Really Happened radio show. Putting America first, second, and third. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It's Friday, October 4th, 2013. Thank goodness it's Friday. Thank goodness it's Friday. So forth and so on. We got a lot of stuff to talk about today. It's day 4 of the government shutdown, and so far nobody I know is really missing it. And the lovely Lady Claire will be joining us in hour number 3 today. I know a lot of people were missing her regular weekly appearances, but she's back on the microphone in our third hour today. Our phone lines are open, 800-313-9443, 800-313-9443. Sam the man is sitting in our control room, ready to answer the phone when you call on in. And, of course, we have to start off. Happy Sputnik Day. It was on this day in 1957 that Russia launched the first successful Earth-orbiting satellite. And really rattled the U.S. and launched the race into space. Now, I want to sort of recap on the situation with what's now being called the D.C. driver. This young woman, apparently working as a licensed dental hygienist, brand new baby, just a normal, everyday citizen, just started driving wildly around Washington, D.C. The story keeps changing. And it turns out she was completely unarmed. And it turns out, yes, she was on prescription antidepressants. Now, one of the most shameful things to come out of this yesterday was this video of the entire House of Representatives giving a standing ovation to the police officers who shot down this unarmed woman, rather than, like, shooting out her tires or laying one of those little strips. Because all she was doing was driving around. And even this story that she was ramming barricades is now suspect because photos of the car after she was killed don't show a whole lot of damage to the front of the car. Now, she did back into a police car. There's damage on the rear of her car, but not on the front, consistent with this idea that she was trying to ram the barricades at the White House. So the entire story is starting to look like your typical Keystone Cop exercise by law enforcement that's trigger-happy and doped up on SSRIs themselves, according to this study down in Florida, to a greater percentage than the general population. But it is confirmed she was suffering from postpartum depression, which happens to a lot of mothers. It's hardly a rare situation. The corporate media is trying to spin it. She was suffering mental illness. So all you mothers out there who've had babies and went through that postpartum depression, the government now thinks you're all mentally ill. Now, I went over to a medical website and I looked at the list of all the drugs prescribed for postpartum depression. It does include Prozac and Paxil, which are the same drugs these mass shooters have been on, that they're always, the gun grabbers are waving at us, we've got to take away the guns. No, you've got to take away these pills. And what's really annoying and angering about this House of Representatives standing up and cheering wildly that the cops shot this woman who was on these medications, Congress did hold hearings on the long and well-documented link between these prescription antidepressants, in particular SSRIs, and their links to acts of extreme violence, mass shootings, suicides. And Congress chose to do nothing because, you know, the companies that make and sell these medications are huge campaign donors, so we can't do anything that's going to upset them. And the same thing with the corporate media, who are very much dependent on all those big budget pharmaceutical commercials, you know, announcing new hydroflamistan that'll cure pimples on your nose, you know, but caution, use of this drug may result in your nose falling off completely and you're falling over dead without warning. Now, NBC has set a new low for corporate support propaganda. They're out there saying that this woman thought Obama was stalking her. And that was why she did what she did. And again, it's these medications, and it's confirmed she was on them. We don't know the specific one yet. We're trying to find that out. These medications trip off completely unexpected outbursts of violence and just irrational behavior. But NBC probably got a phone call from the pharmaceutical company saying, don't you dare mention the pills. Just say she's crazy or something. That's what those sheep out there, those consumers, that's all they need to know. They don't need to know what's really going on. Just tell them what to believe, and they'll believe you, as they always do. And NBC wonders why their audience share is in major, major decline. And they're already trying to cover for this situation about why the police just gunned this woman down rather than shooting out the tires on her car, because looking at the videos and looking at the absence of damage on the front of her car, she was just driving around crazy. Why not shoot out the tires? Why not put down one of those spike strips that they're always showing us on those reality TV cop shows? And so now they're already coming out there and say, well, if the police had shot at the tires, they might have missed the tires and the ricochet would have hit somebody on the far side. Well, if you're shooting at the woman and you miss her, the bullet's still going to go right on through the car and hit somebody on the far side. It's a complete nonsensical story. In fact, if you're shooting at the near tire and there's a ricochet, that ricochet's probably going to hit the underside of the car. And they're already trying to come up for this thing. And like I said, looking at photos of this woman's car, this Infinity, there's damage on the rear from where she backed into another police car. But there's no damage on the front from where she supposedly rammed the barricades at the White House and the Capitol building. Now, they were showing a photo of an absolutely destroyed police car. That is not the one she backed into. I'm wondering if the vehicular accidents were all done by the police, just like all the gunfire was from the police and the Secret Service. And by the way, I have a little comment over there. Considering that this incident started at the White House, and the Secret Service were the first ones to open fire on her, and missed, which is why she was able to drive over to the Capitol building, those Secret Service guys need to spend a little more time on that gun range. Because shooting people who are a threat to the president is their job, and I understand they thought at that moment this woman and that car was a threat to the president, and they missed. That's probably going to be keeping Obama up tonight, worrying. These guys really aren't very good, are they? Now, getting back to the shutdown and the almost petty targets being shut down by the government to sort of make the point, we're shutting down all these things here, and it's your fault because you won't let us go further into debt. There's a growing brouhaha, if you will, over this World War II memorial, which was barricaded just when a group of World War II veterans wanted to visit their own memorial. That memorial is there to honor them and their contribution in World War II, and they were blocked from it. There were some barricades put up there. Now, not taking away from the symbolic importance of the World War II memorial, it is just a pile of stone, and it doesn't cost much to keep it open. You just leave it open. And maybe the grass isn't being cut, and maybe the trash isn't being emptied, but let these World War II veterans look at their own memorial. They have traveled all across the country in many cases to be there. And instead, the government throws a tantrum and say, well, you won't let us go further into debt. We're going to lock off that memorial. And, of course, the veterans simply pushed the barricades aside and went in and visited the memorial. And today the barricades are back up, and now they're all wired shut. They've got wires linking it together. How much money is the government spending trying to keep these World War II veterans out of the World War II memorials? Probably a lot more than it would cost to just let them wander in and look around. I think that all the active duty military that are in Washington, D.C. or around Washington, D.C. ought to put on their uniforms and go over and join those World War II veterans and escort them into their own memorial. And make a point. These memorials are not the property of the government to dangle in front of us and then withdraw to manipulate us. That's the property of those veterans. It's the property of the people. And we're going to head on out of here for some commercials. We'll be right back. America, welcome back to the show. And again, I understand the real reasons and motives for World War II and World War I. And if you've read my article or seen the video, All Wars Are Banker Wars, you understand that. But when it comes down to those men and women who put on the uniform of the U.S. military services and do what they're told, regardless of the motives of the civilian leadership. They are owed something by the nation. And I consider this act of denying the World War II veterans access to their own memorial to be petty. It's just the government flexing its muscles and saying, see, we can do what we want to do. And for those of you active duty military right here today, take a good look at how this government is treating the veterans of its previous wars. Because someday, that's how they're going to treat you. Now, over at the Claude Moore Colonial Farm in Virginia, this is a park that received an order from the National Park Service to shut down, saying lack of funds, government shutdown. The Claude Moore Colonial Farm Park in Virginia receives no federal funds for its operation. They're not funded by the federal government. And still the National Park Service came in and said, you got to shut down. We got to send that message to the American people. You don't get to play in your own parks until you let us go deeper into debt. It's all theater. It's all show. Now, down in the Blue Ridge Parkway, which is another park, there's a private inn that has a concession on the parkland. And we see this in a lot of places where the national parks do have hotels on the premises. They have them in Yosemite. The Enchantment Resort near Sedona operates the same way. They're deep inside a national park wilderness area. So down in the Blue Ridge Parkway, they've got this Pisquat Inn. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. It's a private hotel. They received an order to shut down from the National Park Service, even though it is a private hotel that funds itself and receives no government money. And to their extreme credit, the owners of the Blue Ridge Hotel are saying, no, you have no jurisdiction here. You can't tell me to shut down. I'm not on your payroll. And I view all the extreme pettiness of these displays of government power as a certain sure sign that power is waning. They're desperate to prove they're still in control. They can say what's going to happen, what's not going to happen. And if you are secure in your authority, you don't meddle in these little tiny places like hotels and parks. Some of these shutdowns are very, very arbitrary. All the grocery stores, the commissaries on Army bases in the U.S. are now closed. Now, yes, Congress passed an emergency measure to make sure these military families are still getting their paychecks. But they have no place to go on those bases to spend the money. Those stores, commissaries are all shut down right now. The golf course at Andrews Air Force Base is open for all the officers to go play golf. It's just arbitrary. Now, if you are a military family and you are on base housing and you're dealing with a closed grocery store or commissary, Sam's Club has announced they are allowing any military with military ID to shop in the Sam's Club stores without having to buy a membership for the duration of the shutdown. And I have to applaud them for this. This is the community taking care of the community. They're realizing that these military people are being inconvenienced so the government can have a display of power of shutting down these things. And they're saying, all right, we're going to open the doors. And so I have to applaud Sam's Club for that. Harry Reid is basically the dominant force, the driving force between blocking funding for veterans programs in the national parks. And it's all very arbitrary. They're taking those parts of the nation and government we the people want, we the people paid for. It's really all of our property. And they're using them as bait and saying, if you want your national parks back, if you want your space program back, if you want, your veteran services and feeding the hungry back, you're going to have to let us go deeper into debt. No, we don't have to do that. Because in a republic, the government's function is to obey the orders of the people. And the people have made it very clear we are sick and tired of all these costly wars of conquest that don't seem to be serving anything except Wall Street's financial interest. We want an end to NSA spying on us all. We want an end to all this money flowing out of our pockets into the pockets of governments in other countries, primarily Israel, which now we know has cost the American taxpayer trillions of dollars. more than 60 times the entire cost of the Apollo moon program has vanished from your pocket and gone over to Israel. I'm going to take a phone call here. Scott in Wisconsin. Aloha, Scott. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Michael. How you doing today, big guy?
Doing okay.
I'm kind of sad over that situation in D.C. You know, I was listening to somebody earlier that the military had checkpoints downtown in Washington. And she probably come up to one, and who knows what was going through her mind, even though she was on these postpartum and maybe these drugs. But I think what they did is it's like a horse that you're taming a horse, and you go in there with a snake. And that horse sees that snake, he's going to start panicking. And I think when you watch that video of her, when they were chasing her around that loop there, she was driving around pretty darn smooth. And that.
Well, she was going in circles.
What happened is,
I'm going to take a guess here. I'm going to take a guess that she was just driving along that road that separates the White House from the Treasury, and she was like going the wrong way or wanted to turn around, and she just pulled into the White House driveway to do a J-turn, and the Secret Service overreacted and started shooting at her, and she panicked. Because looking at the front of that car of hers, she did not try and actually ram any barricades. The photographs show it. The only damage to that Infinity is on the rear section where she backed into a police car.
Well, exactly, Mike. You're exactly right. And Mikey, the thing is this. It is absolutely sickening and sad to see. It looked like there was a 30-man gang hold-up at the White House there with all they had there. The police and everybody. But, Mike, my question is to Washington, when it comes on the 11th and 13th, what are they going to do when there's a million semis rigs down in Washington? We'll see how they react to that one.
Well,
thanks for taking my call, Mike. And I wanted to call in and view my point over that sad situation where, and you're right, Mike, it goes back to what you were saying. For them to get up and to clap their hands over that situation, it is a sad, sick thing in America.
It is
and I'll
very
leave
sad.
you with this, Mikey.
Yeah.
I'll leave you with this. You talk about that situation with these Army boys, and God bless all those soldiers in the past and now. But I just heard our fearless leader say, when these veterans lose their benefits, they should go see a counselor. Take that one. All right, I'll talk to you later, brother.
Yeah, and then the counselor will declare them mentally ill so the government can suspend their Second Amendment privileges because they're afraid of those veterans. They're afraid of all the veterans because that's an already trained military force. Getting back to the D.C. driver, you know, we've all seen these little cell phone videos and other photos from the street. We know the White House has complete, total video surveillance. Where's the video of this woman ramming the barricade at the White House? Why are we not seeing that? I think this woman just made a mistake. She got shot at by the Secret Service. She panicked because she was on these medications, went on a wild melee. Oh, they're trying to kill me and my baby, and it just ended badly. And now they're trying to spin their way out of this disaster. And always, we've got to protect the drug companies. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And again, I'm going to wrap up with this D.C. shooter. It's a horrible tragedy. The woman was unarmed. All the gunshots were fired by the police and the Secret Service. Remember, when the report started, they reported number of injured. One police officer was shot, had to be medevaced. They're shooting themselves. It's a repeat of that disaster we had at the Empire State Building with the New York Police Department where they were trying to apprehend a suspect. 9 bystanders were shot, all by the New York Police Department. Anyway, so apparently we had a caller who wanted an off-the-air question if the woman was shot inside or outside of her car, and I do not know, and frankly I'm not going to spend a lot more time looking into this. We do know from the video where she backed away from the barricades at the Capitol building. Remember, we were being told she tried to ram those barricades at the White House and the Capitol building, and obviously the photos of the front of her car show that that's a complete fabrication. And she backed away, backed into one of the police cars, and as she drives off, you can hear the police shooting at her. So at this point, I'm going to surmise she was killed inside her car. All right, we're going to take another phone call. John in Barbados. Aloha, John. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, aloha, Michael. Yeah, this is your friendly local Caribbean critic. I've just been looking at the report on RT on this chemical weapons thing in Doha, in Damascus.
Yes.
And I wanted to make some comments because of the chief inspector's comments to the journalist on RT. I mean, basically she was saying they examined people who were injured, but only the ones that the rebels offered them. No, they couldn't just go out and pick.
Yeah, and to preface the remainder of your remarks, I mean, the UN chemical weapons inspectors are now acknowledging they did not find any evidence of sarin at the location of this August 21st attack. The only presence of sarin was found in these people that the rebels said, here, check them, they've been exposed to sarin. So the entire case for going to war against Syria over this supposed gas attack on August 21st just evaporated, because the entire case rested on the...
Yeah, they said they'd found no environmental evidence of sarin use, which meant, soil samples, building samples, you name it.
Yeah, and that stuff lingers forever. It doesn't evaporate and go away after a couple of days. That stuff stays forever.
Yeah. The other thing is they didn't exhume or test any dead bodies. They didn't test any cats, dogs, or other animals that would have been around at the time. Basically, the evidence that they were given was handed to them by the rebels, which makes a nonsense of the whole thing.
Yes, it does. All righty. I mean, the story's just falling apart completely. I mean, the entire U.S. case was Assad used sarin on his own Alawite supporters right in front of the UN inspectors on the very day they arrived. And we know it was Assad because the rebels don't have sarin. Well, we know the rebels do have sarin. They've been caught with it. Turkey's prosecuting a bunch of them they arrested with sarin gas. Now we're finding out there wasn't any sarin detectable at the location of that August 21st attack. The only evidence of sarin was in the bodies of, as you say, these people that the rebels took over to the UN inspectors and said, check this one, check this one.
Yeah, but what it means is, to me, is that the people they handed over could have been threatened by the rebels. Because it's still a rebel-held area, you tell the truth. And the ridiculous excuse for not exhuming some of the so-called dead was, well, if they're dead, they can't tell us what happened. How ridiculous is that?
Yeah, it is. It's pretty absurd. It is pretty absurd. All righty. Well, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go. I was going to cover this a little bit further in the show, but apparently some other people have also pointed out that the UN's report on the Syrian attack contains several direct contradictions and paradoxes, and it undermines its own credibility. So, okay, I need the volume up on John.
But at least the lady doing the interview of this weapons inspector actually asked some very awkward questions, and she did a pretty good job. But it was the weapons inspector that really made a mess of things.
Well, the UN is in a very awkward position. They're trying to maintain the position of being arbitrary and objective. And remember, earlier in the year when there was another chemical weapons attack, the chemical weapons inspectors went in and said, yeah, the rebels did it, which was a major hammer blow to the U.S. war agenda. So this time, because of the various politicking that's going on inside the United Nations, these inspectors were sent in to say, only prove that chemical weapons were used and do not attempt to assign blame. So we already knew going in that this particular group of inspectors had been compromised. They were restricted only to finding something that the U.S. could use as an excuse to go in. They came back and they said, yeah, we found evidence of sarin. Now we're finding out they didn't find evidence of sarin at the site of the August 21st attack. They just found traces of sarin in people provided to them by the hired mercenaries. I mean, this whole thing is just complete fabrication from top to bottom. And again, going back to that common sense point of view, look for what should be there and isn't. And what isn't there is a motive for Assad to be using sarin on his own Alawite supporters virtually in front of the UN chemical weapons inspectors on the day they show up. It doesn't achieve any military objective. It certainly does not help him politically. He doesn't have a reason to do it, and that is why this story was obviously nonsense right from the start.
Okay, Michael. Yeah, I mean, it really does show the political motives behind these.
Oh, it's all political. It's all political. All of these wars that we're in right now are all about forcing the resource-rich areas of the world to sell those resources only for U.S. dollars, to bolster the whole petrodollar scam that has propped up the American dollar since Nixon ended gold convertibility. It's all about forcing the world back onto Bretton Woods, where the world has to come to the U.S. and borrow some dollars in order to conduct commerce amongst themselves. What the Federal Reserve did to the American people, Bretton Woods did to the rest of the planet. And now the rest of the planet is breaking away and say, we've had it. And that's the reason for all these wars. By golly, you will sell your resources only for dollars. By golly, you will go through the dollar for any kind of international trade and banking. That's what this is really all about.
Well, I think it's stirring, not just in America, but everywhere around the planet, the idea that enough is enough. We've had enough of this nonsense.
Yeah, well, I think everybody's saying that. I think everybody's saying that right now. All right, John, thank you for the call. We're going to let you go here. Got another story I want to get into before the next commercial break. Apparently, President Obama has gone to Goldman Sachs to obtain what amounts to a payday loan to keep the government going, even as the American people are starting to more and more strongly oppose an increase on that debt ceiling. Now, we know how payday loans are abusing people, and here's the President of the U.S. going to basically get a payday loan, but he doesn't have to worry about the abuses. You will pay the costs of that. And Obama needs to go back and remember about that deal that Goldman Sachs did with former Greek Prime Minister Papandreou to conceal Greece's debt problem with currency swaps, which actually doubled Greece's debt. And this tells us Obama is desperate. He's grasping at straws to keep this little Ponzi scheme pyramid going a little bit longer. He is looking at the very real possibility of being the very last president of the United States of America, and he knows how bad that's going to look on his resume. He wants to just find some way to just kick that can just another 3 years down the road, so it's the next president who has to go down in the history books as having destroyed the nation. But this nation has been on a path to destruction for 100 years, starting with President Woodrow Wilson, who admitted in his own diary, I have unwittingly destroyed my own country. Talk about insanity. Now, we're going to be talking about Obamacare a little bit. We're getting all these horror stories from all over the place. We were talking yesterday about these people who tried to sign up, and they went through and they filled in all their information, and then they looked at the insurance they were being offered was a $14,000 deductible for a policy that cost $500 a month. And when they chose to opt out, they immediately got the email threatening them with a $4,000 fine from the IRS if they didn't complete the enrollment process. It's a cash grab. Going to take a break for commercials, and we will be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking about Obamacare, and it is a cash grab. That's all it is. We had that story yesterday where somebody actually managed to get through this very buggy, crappy software system. $88 million of your tax money went into this. And by the way, have you noticed that even though the NASA and NOAA and FDA and all those other websites are now showing that we're unavailable because of the shutdown, boy, that healthcare exchange, that is open for business, and business is what it's all about. So we're talking about this story yesterday where somebody got in, filled out all the information, and after they put in their name and contact information and all the rest of that stuff, then they were presented with their choice for provided insurance for their income bracket. And it came out to about $500 a month in premium and a $14,000 deductible, which means under Obamacare, for the vast majority of the American people, they will be paying $500 a month for an insurance policy they will never receive any benefits from. That's what this is all coming down here. And somebody sent me some information. We put it up as a story at whatreallyhappened.com. Illinois Comprehensive Health Insurance Plan, or it's as bad as you thought it would be. And this is a repeat of the other story from yesterday. They're basically step-by-step going through the enrollment. And it says you have to enroll first before we tell you what it's going to cost and what you will get. This is right out of Nancy Pelosi's "we have to pass the bill before you can find out what's in it." Now, when we were in the wonderful world of optional private insurance, those insurance salesmen would come in and say, this is what you're going to pay, and this is what we'll give you for what you're paying. And then you got to choose whether or not you were going to sign up. Under Obamacare, you will sign up, and only after you sign up will we tell you how much we're taking from you and how little we are giving back. Now, we all know right now in these dark economic times there are massive bankruptcies all over the United States of America, and it turns out, and this is a story over at Business Week, 62% of all U.S. bankruptcies are due to medical costs. Medical problems, medical costs, caused 62% of all personal bankruptcies filed in the U.S. in 2007. This is before the economy went to heck. This was a study at Harvard researchers. And what they found out is that 3/4 of those bankruptcy filers had medical insurance at the start of their illness, including 60% who had private coverage, not on Medicare or Medicaid. That's how out of control medical costs are. And with Obamacare compliant insurance having deductibles in the tens of thousands, the problem will only get worse. We're going to take a phone call here. Mike in Kentucky. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
What did you say the amount of the fine was? Because that's one thing. I can't find good numbers on all this stuff.
Yeah, it's jumping all over. We were originally told that the first-year fine for noncompliance with Obamacare was going to be an average of about $680, $690 for the average taxpayer, but it was going to jump the next year into the thousands, and it was just going to escalate from there. But according to this story that we were looking at yesterday, the email they got for hitting the opt-out button threatened a fine of $4,000. And the government is already saying if you don't send it in, it's going to be attached to your next tax return, and if you don't pay it, they will go into your bank account and just start taking money, putting liens on your house, and all these other enforcement actions. It is a cash grab. It is looting the American people to prop up a failed economic pyramid scheme.
Well, I don't know if that's that's what it looks like on the surface, but I'm also thinking that there's several other reactions people may have, and they just may join with Aaron Russo figures that says there's 60-some million non-filers. They'll probably just say, I'm not filing anymore, and then try to go off the grid.
Non-compliance is a major, major problem in this country. Nobody wants to admit it. But, yeah, Aaron Russo was correct. I mean, we had him on our show just before he passed away, and, yeah, it's an issue. More and more Americans understand that income tax is a complete fraud. It's not legal.
On both ends of the spectrum, you got people stealing W-2 or W-4 forms, whichever it is, and filing false income so they can get the earned income tax credit that they don't deserve. And then
that's a big scam among the illegal immigrants.
The other scam is going out and working 3 or 4 months as a construction worker, contracting around in different jobs and using false Social Security numbers and filing exempt, so you get the least amount taken out. Mm-hmm. You don't get any credit for the Social Security that they take out, but they don't care. They do care. I mean, the Internal Revenue Service is definitely focusing a lot of fraud detection and enforcement efforts, but it's always at the low end of our economic strata where the actual expected return from prosecution is very, very minimal. They don't go after the 1% for the same reason that we hear the government saying they can't go after the Wall Street banks. It'll simply cost us too much to carry out a successful prosecution. Our government is totally fascistic. If you've got money, you can do no wrong, and if you don't have money, we're going to come after you for your last few pennies. Well, the little people can't generally afford the dream team of lawyers, and so they can't argue the finer points of
It's not even the Dream Team lawyers. The laws are written to give these special advantages to the ultra rich. And that's why it's fascistic. I mean, we're still seeing all this nonsense about the U.S. is going communist. No, it isn't. In communism, the bias is for money to flow from the wealthy down to the general population. Under fascism, the bias is for money to flow from the general population up to the ultra-rich, and that's exactly where we are. We're not communist, we're not capitalist. This is now a fascist state.
Well, even in the communist countries, the elite always had everything that they wanted. I mean, that's like in Orwell's 1984, you know, Richard Burton had the wine, and Winston Smith had never even seen wine before. Mm-hmm. So, you know, you talk about an oligarchical collective that protects the 1%, and that was never what we were supposed to have. But I was just looking, I noticed on your site you don't have a section for Obamacare, and I thought I might suggest that. What section is this? Because I was looking for the story, and what have you tagged it as in there?
My Obamacare stories are always tagged under Science, Health, and Nature, taxes, economy, and dictatorship. Those are the multiple tags I use on all those Obamacare stories.
Yeah. Well, it might be nice to go ahead and shuffle into a new category because this ain't going away, I don't guess, anytime soon.
I think it's on the verge of collapse. I disagree. Because of the D.C. shooting story yesterday, the corporate media has had an excuse to stop talking about all these problems that are showing up at all the state exchanges. But, of course, the corporate media isn't controlling the awareness of America anymore. And here on the independent media, social media, the stories are all across Facebook. We're seeing all these horror stories of not being able to get the system to work. Those few people who are able to get the system to work are coming up, and they're looking at what they're being ordered to buy and how little they will get for it, and they're furious. They're angry.
People are talking about stopping working because they can't afford to work anymore. I just talked to a lady whose husband works in healthcare, and they cannot afford the policy that his is going to with the deductions for her to be on it. Yeah. And she's working part-time at a service industry business, and they don't know what they're going to do, if they're going to cut back the workers or they're going to start actually cutting back the hours this business is open so that they can have 2 part-time workers at 29 hours a week rather than to be able to provide the service to the community. And there's no other service like this for 20-some miles, and you can't ride a bus to it. So, I mean, the implications for this stuff, I don't think people have figured out yet. I mean,
it's not like the government and the corporate media wanted you to understand the ramifications of what they were doing. They've done everything they can to try and hide it. And now that the public is aware of what a bad, raw deal this is, and they're starting to scream, we've got Nancy Pelosi out there saying, well, the Congress passed it and the President signed it, and that's just the end of that, which is complete nonsense. The United States history is full of instances where Congress has repealed bad laws. It happens all the time.
They don't even bother repealing them. Do you see cars on the road that are older than 10 years now? Of course you do.
I drive one.
There's laws on the books that it was a ruckus between the Herbert Walker Bush administration and the Clinton administration. The EPA 2 Act or something, they called it in the early 90s. They were not supposed to retitle any cars older than 10 years old and crush them, and that's not been enforced by policy.
Well, I'm glad for that because I'm driving a 13-year-old Honda. We got to take a break for Phyllis Schlafly and commercials, and we will be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. We're getting breaking news that Jamie Dimon is stepping down from his position as CEO of J.P. Morgan. Hey, he's got his money. He's heading off to just enjoy the rest of his life, and it's just up to his successors and the American taxpayer to clean up that mess. We're going to grab some phone calls here. Jim in California. Aloha, Jim. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Michael. Yesterday I called you and I informed you about Section G of the Obamacare in the IRS code, and that lien and levy authority has been removed for not complying, but you just mentioned that you could be liened or levied.
Well, we'll have to go back and double-check that because I checked with some other sources, and they said that the IRS is still going to enforce that. And, again, we know that the bill is still in flux. They're constantly passing new amendments to the thing. So I'm not ready to basically say that enforcement authority isn't there. It may have been moved to a different section.
It's right there. It's right there in black and white. And so the problem would be enforcing it against a rogue agent. So anyway, that just caught my attention because it's just before the close of the year.
If you could send me a URL where I can actually look at the language in the act, I'll take a look at it. But given the behavior of this government and their desperation to simply take more money from the American people under any excuse, I'm not ready to breathe a sigh of relief and say, hey, this is over and done with. Thank you for the call, Jim. We're going to switch over to Franklin in Florida. Aloha, Franklin. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Thank you, Mike. Listen, it's interesting to hear that Jamie Dimon is stepping down.
Yes. Get out the confetti and the party hats here. They won't allow us to have fireworks, but, you know.
Because I think the end is near for the American dollar as a reserve currency. I don't know, most people don't know this, but I heard something last night that China is going to allow Australia to have two of their national banks start trading in yuan for the Australian dollar. That means the yuan, which nobody else in the rest of the world could own, is now going to be available to the people in Australia.
Well, that is not accurate to say that people in the rest of the world are not allowed to have the yuan. China has signed direct currency swap deals with 8 nations now. In fact, Syria Kenya, the week before that shopping mall false flag, was opening up a yuan exchange inside Kenya, so people could take the Kenyan currency and go direct to the yuan without going through the U.S. dollar. But you're absolutely right. The nations are turning away from Bretton Woods and the U.S. dollar faster than the U.S. can conquer them.
Right. Inflation is going to take off. People don't realize how expensive things are getting. They just need to go to the grocery store and look at how the sizes of the products are being downsized. You're seeing 25, 30% increases in what you're buying in the food aisles. Mm-hmm. And people just don't, I don't know. I don't hear anybody being upset about it. This is what really gets me, that the American public will not stand up against this government and tell them, pull our military bases, close them around the world, put troops on the border, get the illegal aliens out of this country, stop supporting Israel, and get the corrupt politicians out of office.
Well, the people are saying it. They're not being paid any attention to by either the government or the corporate media. In fact, the corporate media is always out there trying to demonize the people who are standing up by saying, oh, they're communists, they're kooks, they're potential terrorists. But the people are awake here. And again, looking at the public backlash against this nonsensical story of Assad gassing his own people makes it very clear to me that the vast majority of Americans are now awake and they are angry. But, again, we are advising do not rise up, certainly not in a violent way, because that's what the U.S. government wants. They've been preparing for that. They've been buying...
Mike, we saw what they did yesterday, that poor young woman. We saw how they murdered her.
Yeah, we did. We did. And what we've been saying...
We do need to protect ourselves.
All right, let me just back up here a little bit, okay? This government has been preparing to declare war on the American people in the 50 states for a long time, buying all that hollow point ammunition, armored vehicles for the local police forces, and all of that stuff. That's what they know how to do. Go out and start killing people to solve their problems. It's what they've always known how to do. But they're preparing to fight the last war, not the current one. The current one is taking place in cyberspace. It is a virtual revolution. And what I have been telling my audience all along is very simple. I know it's hard, but be patient and wait calmly, because the system is going to come down all by itself the way the Soviet Union did. Do not initiate violence against the government, but, as you say, prudence demands we be prepared to protect ourselves when the government initiates violence against us. And, of course, every time they pass another gun law or the gun grabbers go out there, gun sales go through the roof. And 80% of Americans now have at least one firearm.
That's why I moved from Illinois to Florida. It's a concealed carry state, and I have the right to defend myself.
Yes, you absolutely do, especially in a nation where the police are too busy writing traffic tickets to deal with the real crime.
Yes, you're right. Mike, I appreciate what you're doing.
All right,
I hate wasting 3 hours a day having to listen to you, but it's education I need.
Wasting 3 hours? Oh, my goodness. Now I'm insulted.
No, not wasting it, but, I mean...
I know what you're saying. I'm just pulling on your ankle. Thank you for the call, Franklin. We're going to switch over to Keith in Montana. Keith, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Are you here?
Yes, I can. You're on the air.
Yeah, hey, did you look at that video I sent you from Gerald Celente last night?
I didn't get to it. I'm sorry. Which video was that again? Give me a summary.
I'm not sure what the guy's position was. A black American there in Newton, Connecticut, there who did that shooting, and whether or not they should release the evidence as far as that shooter, whatever his name is, Alonzo, whatever his name, being on SSRIs, and how damaging it would be for Americans to know that, because then, of course, they would subsequently not follow their doctor's orders and being sedated and blah, 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 you know.
Well, I'm absolutely in agreement with that. First of all, when there is a crime, there is no reason for the suspect, the perpetrator, to have any right to privacy at all. We need to understand these underlying causes. I mean, Fox News just was running this banner thing, searching for a motive in the D.C. driver. We don't need a motive. We know she was on antidepressants. And this is the biggest medical crisis facing the American people, but it's being protected by government and the corporate media to protect the profitability of those pharmaceutical companies that are selling these medications. 20% of Americans are now on prescription antidepressants, and for a segment of those people, it produces these episodes of extreme violence. We have been seeing a skyrocketing increase in domestic violence. I mean, let's set aside mass shootings and trying to, ram the White House and other stuff. There has been an explosion in domestic violence. And, of course, the feminists are out there saying men are bastards and the rest of that. But is the rise in domestic violence, is that linked to these people being on prescription antidepressants? Are we seeing, guys who are normally peaceful go into a bar and get into a bar fight and they have no idea why? These are a major, major problem, and they're being foisted on us, and the dangers of these medications concealed because it's all about selling more product to the American people. This quest for dollars has absolutely warped our nation's character. And we no longer have a society that operates on a balancing of needs and agendas and desires, but it's just all completely swamped by, I have to get another piece of paper with colored ink on it. And it's just absolutely destroyed the national character.
Yeah, that's why I always look at this thing like these antivirus programs. Why doesn't the server run a massive antivirus protection on it and thus spare countless millions of people around the world from having to go out and buy that program like that? They could just delete infected emails and it'd solve the problem. Well,
the NSA, in theory, could find all of these cyber criminals, and if you crucify a few of them on national television, that hacking problem would go away. But it stimulates the economy by forcing us to go out and buy all this computer antivirus and firewall and all the rest of that stuff that we otherwise wouldn't. That's right. What this is. Stimulating the economy means getting you to buy something you don't really need in order to draw more wealth from you for the corporations and the government. Thank you for the call, Keith. We've got to take a break for commercials. We'll be back with more phone calls after these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And before I take another phone call, you're going to love this one. Apparently, the National Park Service tried to put barricades around Mount Vernon, George Washington's place. Mount Vernon is not supported by the federal government. It's not owned by the federal government. It is owned by a private foundation that maintains the property as a museum. And the Park Service was going to close it off, saying, if you want to visit George and Martha's place, you have to agree to let us plunge you deeper into debt. It's all theater. It's not very well directed, is it? We're going to go to the phones now. Mike in Minnesota. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. I was just wanting to bring up something I just read recently in regards to Switzerland having that national drill, to keep out the golden horde or whatever. And the funny thing is, given that the Bank of Banks, the BIS, is located in Switzerland, I kind of wonder if maybe this is a sign that they're actually not so much worried about all the people swarming in there, but that they're getting ready to pull the plug.
Well, first of all, I don't think anybody is getting ready to pull the plug or intentionally crash the economy or intentionally destroy the dollar or the stock market. The problem is they can't stop it from happening. The whole scam, all the way up to the Bank for International Settlements, it is a pyramid scheme. Because the only way they can keep it going is to always find larger and larger pools of new borrowers to allow the creation of money, part of which is siphoned off to pay the interest on the old money. And like any pyramid scheme, once you have maxed out the population and you can't find those new, wider populations of new borrowers, it's collapsing. It's going to collapse, and there's no way to stop it. Nobody's intentionally pulling the plug and bringing down this economy. It had a design flaw right from the beginning, just like the Tacoma Narrows Bridge had a design flaw and it came crashing down. And that is why when we clean up from this mess and we move forward into the future, we must forever ban private central banks issuing the public currencies alone at interest, because it inevitably implodes and self-destructs. But before it does that, it transfers all the real wealth of the nation and the people into the pockets of those bankers. Okay?
Honest to goodness. Okay.
All righty, and we're going to switch over to Joe in Pennsylvania. Joe, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, how you doing? Can you hear me all right? I just broke up.
No, you're on the air.
Okay, great. Thanks. You're talking about the antidepressants and everything else.
Yes.
And what happens and everything else. I'm on them, and I've been on them for years. So I see it from kind of like a different perspective, but I'm not going to argue with you because I have like mutually conflicting feelings about the whole thing. I mean, my wife, she killed herself. She was on these medications.
Oh boy, I am sorry to hear that. I am really sorry to hear that. I mean, the reality is not everybody on these medications is going to go crazy, but there is a significant percentage of people who do. I had a bad experience with these myself many years ago when I was going through the breakup of my first marriage, and I was seeing my doctor about a completely unrelated issue, and she said, "How are you doing with your divorce?" And I said, "Well, I'm not entirely cheerful." And she said, "Here, let me write you a prescription for," I don't even remember what they gave me. And for 3 weeks, I was happy. And in the 4th week, I just had this incredible crash. I went into this horrible black depression. And the only way I got through it was I kept telling myself, it's just the chemical, it's just the chemical, it's just the chemical. And so, again, yes, a lot of people are taking these medications and they're fine on them, but a significant, alarmingly large percentage of people on these medications are being driven to suicide, acts of violence, mass shootings. There's a wonderful website resource called ssristories.com where you can go and read many of these documented cases. And one that just stuck in my memory from going through the website was this kid who was prescribed SSRIs for attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, which when I was a kid meant teachers boring the crud out of me. And he tried to commit suicide, and there was an intervention. He survived. They got to him in time. When it was all over, they said, "Why'd you try and kill yourself?" And he said, "I don't know. It just popped into my head, and I went with it, and I don't know why I tried to do it." And apparently the guy who came up with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder shortly before he passed away came out and said, "We just made it up to sell pills."
Well, I can vouch for the fact that the antidepressants will make you want to do that, because I lost my stepfather in 2010. He fell into depression and everything else, and he ended up hanging himself. That's like 2 people close to me in a period of like 2 years.
Man, I am
and it's
so
just
sorry.
Like, oh, well, the thing is, I told my doctors when they put me on antidepressants, whenever I go on antidepressants, and I'm saying this for everybody out there listening, I start craving alcohol. I don't know why, but I do. And what ends up happening is I become a functional alcoholic after that. And because I get all these thoughts, I'm so depressed, I stare at the wall, I don't feel like doing anything. All I think about is killing myself. And then I put a little drink up to my mouth, swallow it down, and it's like, oh, I'm in Wonderland. And this is what's happened to me. And it's just like, thank God at least I'm still able to function. And I go to work every day, and it's sober, because I don't want to, get a DUI and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But when I'm off and I come home, I'm, I'm in the shots of vodka and chasing it with, tea, and, I'm somewhere out there in La La Land. And, the thing that scares me more than anything else is me drinking too much, and then really my mind starts getting screwed up, and I wake up the next morning and I look on Facebook, my social pages, to see what it is I said, and I delete it all.
Well, I am not a doctor. I played one once in a movie, but I'm not a doctor. But I would say you might want to think about slowly starting to taper down. Now, on a lot of these SSRIs, when you try and quit, that is when you are at greatest risk for having one of these episodes of violence. In fact, going back to ssristories.com, you will read that a lot of people who went into these acts of violence and mass shooting and everything were trying to kick the drug. Now, my wife was prescribed an SSRI for an off-label purpose back before we realized what her problem was exposure to formaldehyde precursors. And she told the doctor she wanted to get off of them because they were messing her up, and the doctor said, okay, quit taking them. He didn't tell her you have to taper them down slowly. She almost went into convulsions. But I will never, ever, ever, ever take any of these medications ever again in my life. And the theory of operation is that they can basically, block the serotonin from going where it's supposed to go forever and not have it build up and explode through in a very violent fashion. There's a lot of research out there now that is saying that the basic principle on which SSRIs are founded may not actually be working at all. And I did, when I put up the story about confirming that the DC driver was on SSRIs, I included a link to the medications that are prescribed for postpartum depression, and when you go to that page and click the individual drugs, every one of them has a warning saying this may trigger acts of violence. So they know it's a problem, but from their point of view, it's a numbers game. If 80% of the people we sell the medications to are doing fine and give us money, that's okay. It allows us to deal with the 20% who go off on these things, and because they usually kill themselves, they're not going to sue us anyway.
I've got a sheet right in front of me because I'm on Cymbalta right now,
okay.
Which is it's an SNRI. It's a norepinephrine reuptake inhibitor, norepinephrine, right?
Yeah.
And man, I am telling you, you look at this sheet and all the effects, and it's like it's all going on with me, and it's just like when you try to get off this stuff, because I've tried going cold turkey on these things.
No, you can't do
I'm
that.
Tell you.
You cannot go cold turkey. You're just going to have to start cutting the pills. Really, you can't go cold turkey because really bad things will happen. You have to start cutting the pills and go down to, a 3/4 dose for a couple of weeks and a half a dose for a couple of weeks and a quarter dose for a couple of weeks. If you're trying cold turkey, you are at risk. Seriously, don't do that. All right. Good luck to you. I'm sorry for your losses, and thank you for the phone call. I'm sure you reached a lot of people today. We'll be back after these commercials. Hi, America. Welcome back to our show. And this show, this network, Republic Broadcasting, we have some very intelligent people listening to this show because I got an email saying that if this D.C. driver had tried to ram the barricades at the White House in that Infiniti, the airbags would have deployed, making it impossible for her to drive any farther. And in looking again at the photo of the car after it was all over, the airbags are not deployed. So this idea that she was ramming the barricades and this justified gunning her down in cold blood, it's already collapsing. I think she just turned into the driveway thinking she was going to turn around. The Secret Service overreacted and fired at her, and she panicked. And the fact that she was on antidepressants just put her into complete panic land, because that is one of the symptoms of these prescription antidepressants, is you can go into a blind panic at the littlest provocation. Now then, we mentioned it before in the show, but I want to mention it again. A week from today, there is going to be a truckers' strike by all the big rig truckers. A lot of them are going to be driving up to Washington, D.C., saying it is time to restore the Constitution. That's not getting a lot of coverage in the corporate media. Obviously, if you are in the United States, and particularly along that eastern seaboard, you should make a point in the next few days of going over to the grocery store and getting a little extra food in. Of course, if you've been listening to this show already, you probably already have a lot of extra food in your house, but it's all the freeze-dried stuff anyway. But just, an extra loaf of bread, an extra can of soup, or whatever it is that you're going to eat, and have it in your home, because this is going to last the entire weekend, and it will disrupt the normal chains of supply, which are already running on razor-thin margins. Now, we understand there is going to be a parallel demonstration of people on all the overpasses of the highways displaying banners that it's time to impeach Obama, to impeach the entire government. And I think if you are anywhere near any of those people, you need to show your support. Because it is vitally important at this stage in history that we, the American people, get out there into the public and send a message to the rest of the world. We do not support the actions of the United States federal government. We do not support the wars. We do not believe their lies about Saddam's weapons of mass destruction. We do not believe their lies that Assad used sarin on his own Alawite supporters. We do not believe that Iran is a dire threat to the United States requiring an invasion. History has a bad habit of demonizing entire populations for the crimes of the government. We've seen it with Hollywood films about Nazi Germany that inevitably portray all the German people as equally guilty. And we know from history that was not true, specifically because of the Order of the White Rose, who in those pre-internet days risked and lost their lives printing up pamphlets about what was going wrong with Nazi Germany and just throwing them off the rooftops in villages for people to pick up and read. And unless we want to be demonized by future history books as being part and parcel to this war for the bankers, now is the time for Americans to get out there and shout to the rest of the world. We're not part of this. We oppose it. We're trying to stop it. We are not supporting these wars of aggression by the U.S. government, and we will no longer be the wallets of last resort for Wall Street's crimes and corruptions. Mostly because we don't have it. So if Wall Street and the U.S. government says, sure, you can invest your money in the U.S., and if you make money, you can keep it, and if you lose money, we'll make the taxpayers cover the losses, that doesn't work any longer, because we, the taxpayers, are tapped out. We just do not have it. The money junkies got it all. Go after them. Going to take a phone call here. Ed in Georgia. Aloha. Ed, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. How are you doing?
I'm hanging in okay for a Friday.
Good. Hey, I'm going to be quick. But one thing I haven't seen anybody report about with this girl that got shot up there in D.C.
Mm-hmm.
When they first put the video on, you see 4 or 5 gunmen out there, don't you?
Yeah.
Right? The end result is she gets away. Now, let me just go back to that point at the beginning of the video. Look to the left and see all the squad cars that are empty, and not one of those guys thought about driving those squad cars up there and boxing her in?
Well, they did do that. That's why she hit one of them when she was backing away from the barricade at the Capitol building. Now, remember, this all began over at the White House by the parking gate just across from the Treasury building. And, the situation got out of control, and while she was driving from the White House to the Capitol building, obviously the call went out, and they had all the cars trying to converge and block her off.
Well, wait a minute. What I see at the fence is she's pointed towards the fence. There's empty squad cars to the left. They could have brought them up and boxed her right in at the fence. She wouldn't have gone anywhere. And nobody took positional authority out of all those men that were there. Somebody should have thought how to handle that situation.
The tactical situation clearly got out of control, and everybody's reaction, from the Secret Service to the Capitol Police, was pull the gun and start shooting.
That's it. And I can just hear these people now up there. Did you get in on the kill? I mean, this is how these people are thinking anymore.
Well, 20% of the cops are on these SSRIs, according to that study out of Florida, and who knows how many of those Secret Service people are doped out of their mind.
Right. Hey, and one other point I've been thinking about since all this has come down, they keep advertising 800,000 people are on furlough. Hey, look, this country hasn't stopped. It hasn't fallen into a hole.
800.
Mike, let me finish this.
Okay.
I used to work in a federal building. 6 of us were in the office, and I can remember times that I'd be in there, and I'd think to myself, who's going to pay for all these salaries and retirement and pensions? I mean it, because everybody in there made $80,000, $100,000, and we were just like a little tiny speck. Washington, we cannot afford Washington, D.C., we cannot afford all these government workers, and we cannot afford the government employees' unions that have driven those salaries and all their benefits up to a crazy point.
Well, hang on a minute. It's not entirely the union's fault. Now, first of all, 800,000 workers represents only 6% of the entire federal workforce, including the private contractors. But the reason the government is very generous with their pay to government workers is to buy their loyalty. because all of those government workers understand they're making 1.5 to 2 times the money they'd be making doing the exact same job for the private sector. So the U.S. government pays them this extra money, which drives up the cost of government for the rest of us, so that these people will sit there and say, yes, I support the federal government, I'm very happy with the federal government, whatever the government says is perfectly okay.
Well, that's fine. But all of us in the hitherland, we can't afford it. I'm looking at towns down here where I'm at in the South, and all the small businesses are closed out.
Yeah.
The ones that are open are the big, the few big box stores, and you can tell they're having a hard time because when it happens, they move the aisles. There's less stuff in these stores to buy.
Yeah, we're seeing that at our local markets, and one of my favorite local small businesses just went out of business. They had 2 stores, one here in Aiea and one over in Kaimuki, and they just had to close their doors. The vacancies are. We've got an entire strip mall at the bottom of the hill that is now completely closed off, shut down, chain link around it. There's nothing in there at all. I mean, it's all falling apart.
We've got the same thing here all throughout Florida, way out into Alabama, Mississippi. It's shutting down. And Mike, I'm going to tell you something. I'm a retiree, and I can tell you, looking at myself, that I don't spend nearly as much in the market like I used to. I don't go buying pants and shoes and all the rest of that stuff. And we got 10,000 people a day going into this retirement thing. Some of them are going to go in very well heeled. They can spend what they want. But the majority of people are helping their kids out, that sort of stuff. All I'm saying is that the older people that are going to be the big bulls that are up here aren't going to be spending the money and generating and looking for new goods. We don't look for new iPhones. We don't look for, you see what I mean?
Yeah.
And so the money is not going to be circulating for a long time like it was before. We don't buy new homes,
We
so
can't
anyway,
we can't afford it. Everything's being offered on credit, and people just don't want to borrow anymore. In fact, most Americans are paying down their credit cards. I know that's what we've been doing over the last few years, is just get that credit card debt down. And of course, from the point of view of the Federal Reserve, that is a bad thing because this entire economy rests on keeping everybody enslaved to debt. We got to take a break for commercials. Thank you for the call, Ed. Back with another phone call after these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And that earlier caller has sent me in a link regarding enforcement of penalties under Obamacare, and is absolutely correct that apparently under the law as it is currently written, the IRS cannot assess a criminal penalty against you for failure to comply with Obamacare, and there are limitations on liens and levies. Basically, that has been written off. But on the other hand, that story that we got yesterday was that when somebody opted out after seeing the $500 per month premium and a $17,000 deductible, they did get an email saying your penalty for not complying is $4,000. So we're getting mixed signal. I notice there's something else in here that is a little bit alarming, and it has to do, let me see if I can re-find that because I was looking at that. Apparently, there is a provision in here where if a penalty is imposed on you for failure to comply with Obamacare and you can't pay it, it will be assessed against your dependents or against your spouse if you're filing a joint return. So now they're trying to set up the situation where if they throw so much debt on the American people they can't pay it off, it's automatically assigned to your children. Like your children actually have any authority to tell the parents, yes, go out and get health insurance. This thing is a complete bollocks up here. J.C. Penney default risk spikes to an all-time high. Their stock is now at a 30-year low. Early in the week it was a 12-year low. Apparently they succeeded in raising about $1 billion for recapitalization, and it didn't actually do any good. Walmart is now giving lip service to buying more products made in America to get rid of their image of being a job destroyer. I think it's a little too late. And this story is really funny. I laughed when I got it. As you know, Twitter is getting ready to do their IPO because of the wonderful, huge success they had with the Facebook IPO. And apparently stockbrokers are not as smart as they like to portray to the rest of the world because Twitter Home Entertainment Group, which is a company that went into bankruptcy in 2007, saw their stock go through the roof. Everybody thought they were buying into the Twitter IPO. They were buying Twitter Home Entertainment, and they saw the shares go up more than 1,000%. And we can laugh, but when everybody realizes their mistake and dumps the stock, this could actually just shatter what remains of the company. We're going to take a phone call here. Shane in North Carolina. Aloha, Shane. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, man, little word about SSRIs. A friend of mine on Facebook was just posting this article. It was just a random article. To be honest, I didn't even read it, but it was like some kid who killed himself because of bullying, and the parents are now on this crusade, to stop bullying. And I mean, I just read the headline and just left a quick comment, and I'm like, yeah, he was probably on SSRIs. And the guy who posted it was like, no, there's nothing in this article about that. I mean, I just didn't pay any attention to it. And then he commented about an hour later. He's like, oh my God, how'd you know?
Yeah.
doesn't take a rocket scientist.
Yeah, but we're seeing the corporate media. Oh, it was the bullying. It was she thought that Obama was stalking her. They're desperate to find things to blame these incidents on, because those pharmaceutical companies are calling up all the corporate media and saying, look, if you say anything about the link between our product and these acts of violence, we will take our advertising someplace else. And it's a lot of power. We saw that in California with Prop 37, where these GMO companies were calling all the corporate media and saying, if you don't support No on 37, we are canceling our advertising with you. And to a man, every TV station and newspaper in California was No on 37. And that is, right there is a reason to never trust what you're getting out of the corporate media, because it's all bought and paid for propaganda. Remember that story where these two Fox News reporters went out to do a story on this synthetic bovine growth hormone? It was a Monsanto product. They were going to go out to do a puff piece about what a wonderful boon this was to farmers. And when they started getting into it, they were finding all these implications for human health from this product. And they wrote up a story saying it's a good product, but there are issues. They were ordered to rewrite the story by Fox News to take out all the negatives and say, this is wonderful, every farmer in America should have it. The reporters refused and were fired by Fox News. They sued for wrongful termination, and they lost on appeal when the courts ruled that because there is no law compelling the corporate media to tell you the truth, corporate media can order their prostitutes and correspondents to lie to you and fire them when they refuse, and that tells you all you need to know about the corporate media.
Absolutely. Hey, one last thing, too. I really appreciate the bumper music that you play. It's really unique, and it's definitely a lot of stuff that I haven't heard. Is there how would I go about finding out what some of that stuff is? Do you have that anywhere?
I need to bring it up today. We had another call about this, but if you go over to the website for the radio show, which is wrhradio.com, there's a little link to a media player where we have some, but not all of our bump music, and I promise I'll update it over the weekend. But you can go there, and all the information, who the recording artist is, and all of these people have been very generous in allowing us permission to use excerpts from their music on our show. A lot of it's written by my wife, but a lot of it is like antique music. But I promise it's on my list for the weekend to get that player up to date with all of our current bump music, so you can go there and find out who these original artists are and buy their CDs or download their MP3s and help reward them for supporting our show.
Yes, one last thing. I would like to send a song to you for you to check out.
Okay.
And it's perfect. I swear to God, I know you're going to totally dig it, because it deals with the whole SSRI thing, the over-medication of our society on drugs, and it also deals with the hypocrisy of the war on drugs.
Okay, is it your original work?
It's mine, yes, absolutely.
Okay, email me the MP3 and we'll put it into the rotation.
I think you're going to like it.
I already love the topic under discussion, because we've got to keep attention on this link between these dangerous psychiatric medications being foisted on the public and these acts of violence. And we just can't sit here while they blame, oh, it was bullying, it was blah, 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 blah. These are dangerous drugs. A significant portion of people on them are driven to acts of extreme violence. Not all of them end in death, which is why the news doesn't even mention them. Got to let you go here, Shane. Got a couple more stories before the top of the hour. And, of course, in our third hour, Lady Claire will be joining us with her perspective on certain things going around the world. Apparently, under a new California law, illegal immigrants will be allowed to get driver's licenses. I think this is a good idea, because one taste of dealing with the DMV and these illegals are probably going to go back home. Now, as I mentioned earlier in the show, the UN Chemical Weapons Inspection Team that came back from Syria and said, yes, there was sarin, and of course launched Obama and Kerry and McCain into their "we've got to bomb them now" tirade, has now conceded that they did not find sarin in West Ghouta, which was the location near Damascus where this August 21st attack supposedly happened. They only found sarin in human samples from patients provided by the rebels, who would come in and say, here, test this person, you'll find sarin. And as I mentioned, there's another report. It's a YouTube video, and we've got it linked to the front page of whatreallyhappened.com, where people are starting to look at the obvious contradictions and paradoxes in that UN report that call into question its credibility and its objectiveness. Now, Iran's foreign minister is basically back out there saying that Obama is a flip-flopper, which was certainly true. He was going to talk to Rouhani, was going to warm up relations, and then Netanyahu comes into Obama's office and threatens to blow the whistle on 9/11, and Obama comes back out and says, yes, we must make war on Iran. And Mohammed Javed Zarif accused Obama of flip-flopping. The threats are illegal. And he went on to say that flip-flopping like this destroys trust and undermines U.S. credibility. Well, there's not really much of a problem there, because the U.S. government lost all its credibility long ago, certainly back when they were screaming that Saddam had nuclear weapons. And we, the American people, realize the stories coming out of Washington, D.C. and the corporate media are self-contradictory, just darting all over the place looking for traction. They're driven by focus groups. There's no clear narrative in the propaganda, which is why the propaganda no longer works. We'll be back after Phyllis Schlafly and these commercials. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. And for those of you watching on BAM User TV, this gorgeous creature sitting behind me is the ever-lovely Lady Claire, who is now back to joining us on Friday to give us her perspective on some of the events going on. And what is the first topic you wanted to talk about?
Well, the first item I wanted to get to, and this really made me very angry when I read it. It has to do with the military's prescription drug addiction. And this was out of antiwar.com. And the article states, the pattern is relentless. Young veterans, barely 30, over-medicated, and not only uncertain but grim about their future. They may be married but likely divorced, possibly estranged from their children. And the family is very concerned over their mental health and taking notes of the ups and downs. Then one day, the guy dies. Either self-inflicted or because he didn't wake up from, and they're not only getting one SSRI, Mike, they're getting a cocktail of medications.
Well, and we had that Iraq veteran who called into the show, and she said those Army doctors were just handing out these medications like candy, because these kids in uniform understand fully this is not a noble, moral, just war. They're there to conquer lands and bring them back into the clutches of the U.S. dollar and Bretton Woods. And these medications, these guys are coming back from the war zones addicted on these drugs, and either they're having trouble getting off or they just go on taking them. Their doctors write them a prescription, and the U.S. Army is spending more on these mind-altering drugs for our troops than they spend on Black Hawk helicopters.
Well, let me tell you what this cocktail can be. Someone goes in, gets a script for a sleeping pill, anti-anxiety medication, antidepressant, an antipsychotic, and sometimes even a stimulant like Ritalin or Adderall. Now, one of the things that just made my jaw drop when I was reading this, excuse me, these medications may have been tested separately, but have they been tested together for their safety? And from what I'm able to read, the short answer is no.
Not always. Definitely not always.
And to anyone out there who has a vet in their family or has someone in active duty, you've noticed these changes, you need to go with them on their next trip to the doctor. And you need to ask, where are the published studies citing the efficacy and safety of all these drugs together.
Or you can just go online.
Yeah.
It's like I said, on that list of medications for postpartum depression
Mm-hmm.
I posted to the website, you can go into that page and click on the individual medications, and you'll get the warnings, and they're all saying can cause acts of violence and suicide. And you need to find out. We just need to build the public awareness that, yes, many people taking these drugs seem to do okay, but a significant number of people are reacting very badly to them, and we just need to get that public awareness out there because...
And especially if they're on this cocktail of drugs, because one alone could cause fatalities and terrible mood swings, but how all these drugs work together, there are no studies. There are no studies.
And the doctors and pharmacists are not always paying attention.
Yep.
Again, when we lost my brother 2 years ago, we found in his medicine chest 2 medications that are never, ever supposed to be prescribed at the same time and can lead to exactly the symptoms he appears to have died of.
Right. And when my late father enlisted in the Army in World War II, he enlisted disabled because he was very sure that at that point the United States government was on the right side of history. And it's really unfortunate that during this large period of preemptive wars, our military don't have that luxury, you know?
No, they don't. And yes, they're heavily propagandized. They're blocked from seeing websites in the alternative, or rather independent media. But they're smart enough. These kids are smart enough to realize what they're doing has nothing at all to protecting the United States from a foreign invasion.
No.
They're in there just conquering other people's lands and taking control of their resources. And these are kids who, at least prior to their basic training, were decent, moral human beings with a strong set of ethics and what is right and wrong. And they're being told to go out and commit these horrible atrocities. And the government's only response to their growing moral dilemma is to just drug them up and send them back home.
Yeah, it's really criminal what's happening to these kids.
Okay, and what is next on your list of topics?
Well, a couple of things about Iran. Kerry and Hagel are saying U.S. won't be, quote-unquote, fooled into Iran deal. And Secretary of State Kerry and Secretary of Defense Hagel are downplaying these upcoming talks, which are due to start on the 28th of this month, with Iran with a P5+1. And I love the Orwellian way in which some of these guys use the English language. Hegel insisted that engagement was worthwhile, but it didn't mean the same thing as negotiation, and the U.S. recognizes the danger of dealing with Iran. I think it's just the converse. Iran has to realize the danger of attempting to negotiate with
Iran
the US.
understands what a danger the United States is. Russia understands what a danger the United... We all understand the danger presented by the U.S. government. And obviously when Netanyahu was in Washington, D.C., he made the rounds and he laid down the law. You will go kill Iran for us. And we saw that, again, even the Iranian foreign minister is calling attention to it. Obama was talking about, having conversations. We're going to, talk to Iran. Netanyahu shows up, and the entire U.S. federal government does a 180-degree about-face and says, yes, we've got to kill Iran. And it is very obvious that Israel has a lock on our government, and I think it extends beyond mere contributions to candidates via AIPAC and control of the U.S. media. I think literally Israel is blackmailing the entire U.S. federal government with 9/11. And I think Netanyahu walked into that Oval Office and he said, if you don't do what I tell you to do, we will tell the world who really did 9/11, and it'll be worse for the United States than for Israel because, hey, we're Israel. The world is used to us playing dirty tricks. But for you, the United States government, to be exposed as being behind 9/11, it will discredit and destroy you. And so Obama said, all right, we'll send our kids to invade Iran.
Yeah, if we're not going there to the table to negotiate, why is the U.S. going or sending representatives at all?
Well, they're trying to maintain the illusion on the facade of we are still seeking a peaceful resolution, which is, of course, the absolute last thing they want. What the U.S. wants, what they're being driven to by Wall Street, is to conquer Iran and make sure Iran's oil is for sale on the world market only for the U.S. dollar, to get rid of Iran's state central bank and force them to accept private central banking like they did in Libya. Libya had their brand new private central bank issuing the public currencies a loan at interest before the fighting had even stopped.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And there was a statement or an interview given by Netanyahu to BBC Persian, where he said Iran's nukes will spell slavery for the Iranian people. And he also made the claim that Iran is looking to extend the range of ICBMs so that they would literally hit the United States and the homeland.
Yeah, we saw that.
Oh,
this was
please.
being reported at UK News here.
Yeah.
And again, this is more Netanyahu bovine excrement to scare Americans into making war on Israel's enemies. But just everybody stop for a moment and actually think, if only because it makes Netanyahu furious when you do.
And nervous.
Let us say that Iran has missiles that can reach the United States. Why would they use them?
Well, that's the absolute point of this, Michael. I mean, the Iranian leadership may be many things, but they are not stupid. They understand that the U.S. could turn the country of Iran into a molten glass and ashes.
Molten glass and
yeah.
Yeah. Netanyahu, in his statement, actually said, these missiles are for you, the United States, because Iran already has missiles that can reach us.
Yeah.
Well, Iran hasn't launched those missiles at Israel because Iran knows Israel has nuclear weapons, just like Iran knows the United States has nuclear weapons. Iran has not started a war of conquest in over 200 years. It's not their nature. This is Netanyahu one more time sending American children to horrible death against Israel's enemies. We've got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And I need to make a point here. Leaders of nations have immense egos. Take a look at our own leader as a good example.
Oh, yes.
They go to bed at night dreaming of future generations of school children being forced to memorize their names and faces. They dream of statues erected to their honor. They dream of their faces on money and postage stamps. They dream of their face on the national flag, again referring to our own leader. Now, all of that goes away if they do something that destroys their own nation, if they start a war they cannot possibly win. And a real Iranian attack on the United States, as opposed to the false flag that I'm certain Netanyahu is already thinking about, would result in Iran being melted into a giant green glass parking lot, and they'd send in the Marines to paint the stripes. Netanyahu states correctly that Iran already has these missiles that can reach Israel. Have they launched one? No, because Israel is a nuclear-armed state, so is the United States, and Iran is just not in the habit of attacking and invading other countries. They haven't done it in over 200 years, which is quite a contrast to the United States and Israel, which these days can't seem to go 6 months without bombing or drone striking somebody.
And the other issue, and pardon me, but you just touched on it, what about the Israeli nuclear arsenal, depending upon which research paper you read? They're either the 4th or the 6th largest nuclear-armed country in the world.
Iran certainly knows that those nuclear weapons are there.
Yeah.
The other regions, the other nations in the region know those weapons are there. That is the reason Assad built up a chemical weapons stockpile. It's sort of the poor man's weapon of mass destruction to try and hold Israel's aggressions in check.
And there is absolutely no ambivalence on this issue. From the time back in the 80s when Mordecai Vanunu did his expose of the nuclear facility at Dimona. And so in looking at all this and in looking at Netanyahu's statements, Iran is not the regional problem here. Iran is...
They never have been.
Yeah, Iran is a signatory to the NNPT, which gives that country the right to develop nuclear energy peacefully and allows the IAEA to inspect their nuclear facilities on a consistent basis. And so far, absolutely no evidence has been presented to the effect that Iran has nuclear weapons program at all.
Okay, go ahead, and I turned your volume down. You can go ahead and clear your throat. Yeah, absolutely. We have the situation where Iran is playing by the rules. Now, under Article 4 of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, the United States is obligated to help Iran build their peaceful nuclear facilities, which is a really good way to make sure there isn't a secret bomb factory underneath that power station, the way Israel has at Dimona. But the United States has abandoned Article 4, and in using threats of military force to coerce Iran into surrendering their rights under the Non-Proliferation Treaty, which Iran and the U.S. have signed, it is the United States government that is in violation of international law. It is the United States government that is failing to meet its international obligations. We're the bad guys on this. Iran is trying to play by the rules. The United States and Israel are not. Israel got caught selling clandestine nuclear weapons, or trying to sell a clandestine nuclear weapon to South Africa, which is the very activity the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty is supposed to prevent. And they're pointing the fingers at Iran and saying, they're the bad guys, go kill them.
And the Israeli government consistently refuses to become a signatory to the NNPT and refuses to allow their nuclear facilities, to be inspected.
Absolutely.
Now, the next set of meetings with the P5+1 will be on the 28th of this month. That's another 24 days, a little over 3 weeks. Between now and then, I would not rule out some sort of horrific false flag, perhaps here on American soil, to be blamed on Iran in order to completely
Lindsey Graham already told
talks.
us it was going to be Charleston Harbor, and we've got apparently at least one nuke floating around the country without a paper trail.
Right. But the problem here is, in the world of public opinion, both domestically and internationally at this time, the public will know who did this, and they'll know for a darn certainty that it was not Iran.
Well,
Because,
they'll suspect here, and this is why we keep hitting this issue over and over again.
Right.
Because the only way we're going to deter a false flag is to create a climate of doubt in those who would carry out that false flag that the official cover story is going to be believed.
Mm-hmm.
Doubt is our most potent weapon against more wars and more false flags, and that's why I made up that funny little poster that's gone viral all over Facebook about false flag, you've never been so scared, or whatever it is I put on that thing. And the more we talk about it, the less likely they'll go ahead, because knowing the public backlash against the lies about Syria, knowing that the public knows they were lied to about Iraq's nuclear weapons, knowing that Israel survives on false flag attacks, whether it's USS Liberty, U.S. Cole, Le Bon Affair, 9/11, trying another false flag right now, there's no guarantee that it's going to work. Now, they're desperate, and they may try it anyway. But again, stop and think and look for what should be there and isn't. Why would Iran set off a nuclear bomb in the United States or anywhere else?
And because right now it appears that Iran may get much of what it is hoping for with this next round of negotiations. It makes no logical sense whatsoever.
Oh, well, if you use logic, the terrorists will win.
Sorry about that.
If you're using logic, you're an anti-Semite Hitler lover who wants Arabs to kill Jewish babies.
Oh, please, no.
Oh.
Please, no.
You know what's really interesting? I just got to throw something in here right now. Apparently, Pew Research just conducted a survey among American Jews and found out most of them are just fed up with Israel as well. Abe Foxman over at the ADL came out and said they're just being anti-Semitic.
Doesn't he have any other excuse?
No, that's just the only one that they have there, you know.
Yeah.
So now American Jews are anti-Semitic because they won't follow Benjamin Netanyahu.
Oh, and speaking of Iran, please, all of you out there who can, Google this. It's a little video. It's very funny. It's called Don't Tell Mom I'm in Iran. We've had it at the top of our website a couple of times. But it is this very articulate, lovely Jewish young man who's a filmmaker. And he's in Tehran, and he is being guided to their houses of worship, to the synagogues. They are beautiful, the way the Persian and Jewish elements have been integrated in these synagogues. They're just gorgeous. And he gets a trip to the parliament in Iran, and we find out that Judaism is one of the protected religions under the Iranian constitution, which I didn't really realize, but yeah, it's true. And the Jewish community there seems to be thriving in such a way that they aren't so sure about making aliyah or coming, quote-unquote, home to Israel. And
Israel actually offered financial incentives for the Iranian Jews to immigrate to Israel, and the Iranian Jews said, no, thank you. We're very happy here.
Yeah.
And if Iran was really this new Hitler and new Nazi empire that wanted to exterminate the Jews, wouldn't they be starting with the Jews in their own country? You know, but the Jews in Iran are treated far better than the Palestinians are in Israel.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, I just bumped that video to the top of the page, so it's now on the front page of What Really Happened.
Thank you. All of our readers and listeners, please go see it. Listen. See for yourselves how Iranian Jews feel about where they are in society and how they're doing. And from what I saw, it's pretty darn good.
Except for the traffic jams.
Yes, traffic is not fun.
Traffic is a little bit of chaotic. Well, actually, it's no worse than Boston or Rome. I've been in traffic in both cities.
Yeah.
Rome was the worst. Oh, don't get me started. Let's see. We're coming up on another commercial break, and we'll be back here in a little bit. I know we've got some callers waiting online.
Oh, good.
And they've got topics that you're not covering, but so I'm going to ask them to be patient. We will get to you before the end of the show.
Okay.
We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. Claire's got one more story she wants to talk about, and then we're going to start taking phone calls, and I want to thank all those callers who are waiting very, very patiently to get on the air. So, Claire, you had one more.
Yes, and there is very little coverage about this on the corporate media. Russia is expecting India and Pakistan to soon become full members of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. It's kind of a Eurasian security bloc. And this is going to be a good thing in some ways, but not so good for the dollar. There have been tremendous territorial disputes between India and Pakistan on their borders, and perhaps they will now be mediated in a more negotiated kind of way rather than people picking up arms against each other. Also, with China and Pakistan, which do have border disputes on a consistent basis, but it's going to be pretty lousy for the dollar because most of the members of SCO are also what are called the BRIC, B-R-I-C nations. And last month, I don't know if you remember this, but the BRIC nations have decided to put $100 billion to developing a reserve currency that is very stable.
It's basically they're creating non-dollar international economies,
right?
And Shanghai Cooperative Organization has one of their own as well. They're probably at some point they're going to merge.
Yeah.
And it goes back to the statement I made before. Nations are leaving the dollar faster than the U.S. can conquer them, which is why this current war policy is doomed to failure.
Yep. You know, you're almost hearing the theme from Exodus with regard to the U.S. dollar right now.
Oh, absolutely.
Pretty awful.
The U.S. government and Wall Street did it to themselves. They got rich and lazy, growing wealthy, just getting a piece of the action of everybody's commerce out there. The Federal Reserve did it to us 100 years ago. Whenever you go out to buy a newspaper or a hamburger or whatever, the bank is getting a piece of the action because that currency that you're using entered circulation as a loan at interest, and it's accruing interest while it's in your pocket.
Right.
And what the Federal Reserve Act did to the people of the United States of America, Bretton Woods tried to do to the rest of the world. If you're engaging in international commerce or banking, you must first come to the United States Federal Reserve and borrow dollars at interest. And the rest of the world basically got sick and tired of that whole deal, and they're breaking away. And the U.S. is literally trying to declare war on the rest of the world to force them back into Bretton Woods, force them back into dependence on the U.S. dollar, and the rest of the world has had it.
And the U.S. dollar is nothing more than a printed piece of paper right now.
Backed up by the slave labor of your great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandchildren.
Yeah, that's kind of a depressing thought.
Yeah, especially for those grandchildren.
Yeah.
But that's basically the whole essence of this pyramid scheme. It's just pushing the debt forward and pushing the debt forward. And, hey, you know, I'm going to be dead. I don't have to worry about the destruction I'm causing. I want my goodies now here. Anything else?
I think that was it for this session.
Well, thank you for joining us. I'm going to pull your microphone down now. We're going to start taking phone calls. Alex in Vancouver, aloha. Thank you for waiting. What's on your mind?
Hello, Mike. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. You're on the air.
Okay, perfect. Just going to quote two headlines been in the news lately. Money News, Christine Lagarde warning failure to lift debt ceiling could damage world economies. And the second one, Reuters, Japan warning of severe global impact from U.S. fiscal standoff. As we both know, the dollar's under intense pressure, probably the most pressure it's been under in decades, if ever. I have a question. Do you think the U.S. could be deliberately trying to destroy weaker economies in order to protect its position in the world and then later provide the necessary stimulus to its own economy to continue business as usual? Do you think that the U.S. is going to deliberately default on some debts, let global economies fail, and then at the last minute step in to save its own?
That's an interesting question. We know that the U.S. has engaged in deliberate economic sabotage. In fact, Venezuela just kicked out one of our ambassadors for trying to undermine part of their export economy in order to keep them slaves to debt. This is a process that goes all the way back to the 1980s. And even earlier in South America, where these governments in South America would come take out these huge loans from American banking institutions, and then the CIA would go into those countries to do crop sabotage and industrial sabotage so those nations couldn't pay off their debts in order to drive them deeper into debt and deeper into control. Now, I don't think the dollar is being destroyed deliberately. I think they can't stop it from happening. But there's absolutely no question that these private central bankers, when it all collapses, they'll be out there saying, we'll print out new paper and ink certificates that you can borrow from us to keep the economy going, and we need to be ready to run these bastards out of town on a rail. Christine Lagarde comes from that private central banking mindset where the solution to all the problems is to increase the indebtedness of the people to keep them debt slaves, even if it takes a world war to do it. Christine Lagarde is on record as saying that even though half the Greek debt was arrived at through fraud and corruption, that the Greek people just ought to accept that it's their debt that they're going to have to pay off. So at this point, I wouldn't listen to anything Christine Lagarde has to say about anything. It is up to we, the people, to decide what is a legitimate debt and what is just part of this massive fraud perpetrated on planet Earth by all these private central bankers.
I mean, regardless, the U.S. economy, I think, is still the strongest in the world as far as GDP is concerned. And, you know, using that might, could it crush opposing nations like China and Russia and, you know, other nations?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I'll tell you why. A huge part of America's calculated gross domestic product comes from this so-called service economy, people doing each other's laundry for a fee. And this kind of activity, and it goes back to the 1980s, does not produce saleable or exportable products. And when you look at the U.S. economy from the point of view of balance of trade, we have one of the worst and weakest economies of any industrialized nation. Russia, since the fall of the Soviet Union, has just exploded into manufacturing and agricultural exports. They have one of the highest trade surpluses on the planet. We all know what a manufacturing titan China has become. And so the reality is the U.S. economy, in terms of manufacturing and agricultural output, is already in a position of being unable to compete with Russia and China. What the U.S. excels at is financial shenanigans and rigging the markets and just gaming the system to make the 1% insanely rich. But when it comes down to an actual conflict with Russia and China, we don't have the actual hard currency. We don't have the manufacturing. We don't have the manpower to prevail in conventional wars against those two nations. And we have the added burden that for all the money and wealth that has been spent on the war machine in the United States, we are not getting effective quality weapons systems for that money. We were reporting earlier in the week about how the Pentagon's own watchdog has identified 137 major issues with the F-35. They still can't put that into actual combat. F-22 still asphyxiating its people. The new class of littoral combat ships are considered just barely above useless. They're underarmed, under-armored. Their electronic systems wide open to outside interference. These are all costly boondoggles that were all about taking wealth from the American people and giving it to cronies. Russia has been spending their military money far more wisely. They're not building big, huge, complicated, over-gadgeted weapon systems. They're building things that are designed to get past America's complicated weapon systems, like sea-skimming cruise missiles that are maneuverable to foil a ballistic prediction of their track. Same thing with their latest generation of nuclear warheads. They are maneuverable, they corkscrew, they dipsy-doodle, which makes this entire $35 billion ballistic missile defense system completely obsolete. The U.S. throws money at the problem. Russia is throwing their brains. Yeah. Okay?
I mean, there's no question, just like the human body, when it's in its final death throes, it thrashes around, and that's exactly what the U.S. is doing right now. And I'm afraid that they will do anything to prevail, and that's pretty scary.
That includes the use of nuclear weapons. Yeah, if they get into war with Russia and China, knowing we cannot defeat them conventionally, yes, the U.S. will resort to their nuclear weapons, because the U.S. is the only nation that ever actually has used nuclear weapons against civilians of another country. Sure, they'll do it again. And that's why we're working so hard to stop this thing while it is still stoppable. because once we're committed to war with Russia and China, a nuclear exchange becomes inevitable.
Inevitable. You are awesome, Mike. Keep doing what you're doing. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, and we're going to switch into Irene in California. Aloha, Irene. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Irene, there you are.
To talk about. I wanted to talk about the guys and the women that are on meds. I was working as a pharmacy technician out at the VA out in Brentwood, and they have them walking like zombies. And it's more than that. They have them, if they're on insulin because they have diabetes, they're on all the insulin, and they shouldn't be like that. And also, I'm drawing a blank here.
Well, that's okay, Irene.
Really
Irene, we got to take a break for commercial, so collect your thoughts, and we'll come back to you after these words from our sponsors. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're talking with Irene in California, and Irene, you were giving us a story about how these veterans walking around your facility were just completely zombied out on these medications.
They were, and it wasn't just like one, drug. It's all of them that they give them. And you don't do this to the civilians, that are like me and you. The way they're treated is totally different. And when they're asked for an appointment, it could be 3-6 months down the line, even a year, to get an appointment in for specialized things. And then also, I came on the pharmacy technician being one in 98, and that's before all these drugs came on to the market that weren't even tested, which was really weird to me. And, they were giving out, like, the fen-phen, where it killed so many people. Look at Tylenol was pulled from the shelf and then snuck back, probably 2 or 3 months later, and people don't say anything because their mind is mush. The people don't remember what happened from the day before. So, this. And then also, I wanted to say I went to Indian Health, and almost all the adults had diabetes, and almost all the children had asthma.
Yikes.
And I feel like this was due to vaccinations, for the children getting asthma, and also the area that they put them in, real dusty area. It's not good for asthma.
No, it definitely isn't. We actually had an article on whatreallyhappened.com just a few days ago, where somebody found a link between a commonly prescribed medication that was actually causing diabetes.
Yeah, it's not that hard to get. Like the Doctor of Waters, Dr. Parker, when people are drinking the recycled water, it's missing an ion that will cause diabetes. This ion is only present with water that hasn't been treated with the chlorine or chloramine or, whatever they're putting in there, the industrial waste.
Irene, Claire has a question for you.
Yes. Irene, when you were seeing these people getting this, if you will, cocktail of medications because they were suffering from post-traumatic stress and everything that went along with it, did the doctors ever comment or say that there was literature that they had proving that the combination of medications they were giving these vets were actually safe?
Right. I even brought it up to the pharmacist, and I said, I told him, this is bad. How could you allow this to go out and not even talk to the doctor? And he's like, well, he's the doctor. He makes the decisions. I go, but they're not supposed to be on all the drugs, like the asthma inhalers.
Yeah.
They're on all of them. You're only given one and maybe a tablet, and then you're told to switch up because your body gets dependent, and then it won't work, and then you need a different one. But you're told not to take both of them, and they're told go ahead, use all the inhalers and use them when you want to.
Yeah, because those government contractors are getting all that money. Like I said, the U.S. government is spending more on antidepressants than Black Hawk helicopters in the war zone. Irene, I got to let you go. We're almost at the end of the show, and we got a bunch more callers I'm going to try and get to before the end of the program. And we're going to switch over to Fred in, is that Michigan or Missouri?
Michigan. Thanks,
Michigan.
guys.
Okay.
I'm really delighted to hear about the Iranian Jewish people.
Mm-hmm.
And it caused me to think about the videos, Gaza Strip, and peace propaganda promised land, and whenever you want, if you've not seen them, those would be great to see.
We have, and we have linked them to what really happened. There's a lot of videos coming out from the region, and it's very important to look at them in order to see these people as just other people living their lives the way we do, and break free of this constant demonization and dehumanization that is part and parcel of the war propaganda coming out of the U.S. government in Israel.
Absolutely. And by the way, Brisdell, speaking of pharmaceuticidal, that's my word, pharmaceuticidal.
I love that.
That's wonderful.
I love that.
You can use it all you want. I don't have a copyright or a trademark on it, so
Thank
be
you.
free to use. But a Brisdell, which has been prescribed to ladies for hormone replacement therapy, causes diabetes.
Oh,
I
dear.
think that was the article that I saw earlier in the week. Yeah, and whatever happened to Hippocrates and first of all, do no harm?
Yeah, and what about let food be your medicine and medicine be your food, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing. Fred, I hate to cut you off, but we're almost out of time here, and I'm going to switch over to Deloitte in, I guess it's Indiana. Are you there?
Deloitte, I'm in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho.
Oh, Idaho.
okay.
I'm sorry. I lost my little list
okay.
of state abbreviations when I changed monitors.
Well, I just wanted to tell you real quick. I'm disabled, not from service connected, but I'm disabled, and I go to the VA. And the pain medication, hydrocodone, which is the best one we've found so far, they don't want to give it to me. So they made me sign a pain contract that said I would take any medication and take it exactly as prescribed, or I would be cut off of the hydrocodone in order for me to get it. And they gave me a drug, I believe the name was gabapentin.
Oh, yes.
It's a drug that you have to take it every time you're supposed to take it. And if you don't, you can get really sick. And I refuse to take that stuff because my schedule just won't allow it to happen. I never know when I'm going to be able to take that pill in the morning, noon, and night, you know, like they want it to be taken.
Well, there's something you need to understand, and that is that because in the military and even in the VA, you are required to take what they're giving you, because in a lot of cases you're actually taking part in drug trials without being informed and certainly without giving your consent. And it's the idea of, hey, that's what soldiers are for. We're going to try this medication on them. There have been all kinds of scandals that have come out about these secret medical trials on people who weren't told. I mean, obviously, we've all heard about the Tuskegee syphilis study, various other situations, and you're given these exotic medications because they're just making sure that they're not going to kill too many people before they start selling them on the consumer market. Okay?
Okay. You have a good day. Thank you.
All right, thanks an awful lot. All right, that's it. We're almost here to the end of the show. And again, I think all Americans need to be seriously, first of all, preparing for disruption, because it's coming. They can't stop it from happening. It's not deliberate. It's not the Illuminati. It's just this entire global economy based on private central banks is a pyramid, and all pyramids collapse, and it looks like this one's all going to come down at the same time. You need to be prepared to deal with that. You need to be thinking now what kind of a nation you want in this land when the current government is finished with its death throes and thrashing around, so that we can hold off the carpetbaggers coming in and trying to resell us the same scam all over again. And it is very important that you get out there in public, whether it's in an organized protest or just in your workplace or your shopping mall or whatever, and just speak out about what's going on, because the time is now for we, the American people, to send a message to the rest of planet Earth. We are not part of the crimes of Wall Street and Washington, D.C. We don't agree with it. We know it's wrong. We know they are lying. We know they are engaging in fraud and deception, and we will not be demonized as an entire population for the crimes of just a few tiny megalomaniacs and money junkies who have arrogated to themselves unconstitutional power and control over our lives. By the way, a little side note, apparently up in Washington State they've had to shut down their Obamacare exchange because of all the problems. It simply will not work. And so we're basically coming up here on the end of the show. Claire and I have to go out and get involved in these food programs. And obviously, with food stamp money being cut even more, the need is even greater. You need to get out in your community and take care of the fragile members of your community. You need to network with your community so you've got a network of resources on which to rely when this federal government we are all forced to be dependent on proves to be undependable. And on that note, we're out of here until Monday. We'll be back on the Republic Broadcasting Network. Until then, stay safe, stay informed, make good choices. Get angry at what is being done to you and your children and your grandchildren. Please support Republic Broadcasting. Everything that you send in is put to really good use, and aloha, America.